Islands, Gyeongju or Senkaku, by Victor Uri and Yuta Humanities. Introduction. Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands is a group of 5 uninhabited islands in the Pacific Ocean, currently controlled by Japan. The combined area of these islands is 7 kilometers squared. These islands are disputed between China, Japan, and Taiwan. China claims the discovery of these islands in the 14th century. Location. These islands are located in the East China Sea and are east of China, northwest of Taiwan, and southwest of Japan. Taiwan and Japan's Ishigaki Islands are the closest to these islands, both being approximately 170 kilometers away. China is 330 kilometers away, making it the furthest from the islands out of the 3. Benefits. But why are they disputing over such small isolated islands? Well, this is not only a question about national status and influence, but a battle of resources and economic interests. Firstly, claiming these islands is a way to vastly increase the country's economic zone, which is a right to exploit and extract resources. These resources is potentially mind-blowingly rich. Firstly, there are estimated to be oil reserves containing 100 to 160 billion barrels. This can meet China's need for at least 80 years. There is also enough natural gas that can meet Japan's need for 100 years, enough nickel for 100 years, and enough cobalt for 1,300 years. This outlook suggests that should either nation take control over this island, it will transform itself to a resource powerhouse instead of being dependent on other countries. This will be life-saving to both China and Japan, who are major energy consumers, and their energy demand keeps growing every year. Senkaku Islands first became Japanese territory in 1895 and was actually inhabited by Japanese people, while China barely used it. Those islands have been under Japanese control since then, except from 1945 to 1972, when they were administered as part of Okinawa, which was part of the U.S. After 1972, the U.S. returned those islands to Japan in the Okinawa Reversion Treaty. This was also the year oil findings were released, and China began to declare ownership of these islands. After it was returned, the Kurihara family was given authority over the islands, and in 2012, Japan purchased it for 2.05 billion yen. Here are some reasons why Japan owns the Senkaku Islands. Before 1972, China or Taiwan never expressed any objections to Japan's rule over the islands. Not only did they not object, government officials were always referring to those islands as the Senkaku Islands. Even their ambassador at the time clearly stated that Senkaku Islands were part of Japan. Secondly, China claims that Japan stole these islands during the Sino-Japanese War. However, is this really the case? Before the war, the islands were actually classified as terra nullius, so it wasn't under control by the Qing dynasty. During the time, Japan claimed these islands by using procedures in international law. After that, even Chinese maps and atlases recognized these islands as part of Japan.
China history. The islands were said to be discovered by China during the 16th century and was controlled until Japan took over in 1895 during the Sino-Japanese War. China also claims that the islands were a part of China and were used as a navigational waypoint for the Chinese ports of Chunazhou and Naha. Besides that, it has been said that the islands served as important fishing grounds managed by Taiwan. When Taiwan was returned in the multilateral peace treaty, San Francisco Treaty, China says the islands were returned as well. Also, the Cairo Peace Treaty, Japanese Instrument of Surrender, says that Japanese sovereignty is limited to the islands of Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Shikoku, and such minor islands as determined. China and Japan signed the peace treaty in 1952, in which Japan would have to reaffirm their renunciation of sovereignty of Taiwan, the Pescadores, and recognize all Sino-Japanese treaties before 1941, including that of 1895, would be void. Taiwan was returned to China at the end of WWII, and the islands should have also been given back to China, since it was ceded in the 1895 treaty. Also, China claims that the islands are within their sea space in the South China Sea. The islands weren't specified in the China-Japan treaties. Even though it isn't clear, China argues that the islands are China's property, following the treaties and declarations which involve the renunciation of Japanese sovereignty around China. Taiwan's argument is that the islands are closest to Taiwan, firstly, and the Qing government before gave the islands to Sheng Xuanhai, a Qing official, and as a successor state to the Qing dynasty, Taiwan has inherited the islands, as claimed. Current events. September 7, 2010, a Chinese trawler collided 7 times with Japanese patrol boats near the islands. The Chinese man who was colliding was arrested. He was called Zhang Qixiong. August 14, 2012, 7 Hong Kong activists reached the islands for the first time since 1996. August 19, 2012, 10 Japanese activists swam ashore and put a Japanese flag on the island. September 10, 2012, Japanese government says it has decided to buy the islands from a Japanese owner, diffusing territorial tension. September 14, 2012, 6 Chinese surveillance sailed to the islands and asserted their ownership. In September 15, 2012, the biggest anti-Japanese protest since 1972 happened in Beijing at the Japanese embassy. People hurled rocks, eggs, and bottles. In September 16, 2012, anti-Japanese protests continued in China, and Japanese cars and restaurants were attacked. Protests turned into violence. September 17, 2012, a few major Japanese companies closed down for a short time in their branches in China, for example companies like Toyota and Honda. September 18, 2012, 2 Japanese activists land on the islands whilst anti-Japanese protests continue in China on the day of Japan's invasion on Manchuria. China, Japan, and Taiwan are still battling over the territory of the islands, known as either Diaoyu China or Senkaku Japan. Both have taken immediate action to claim the islands and all the resources with it, as well as boosting national status for whichever country controls the islands.